Okay, you're good.
All right. I want to welcome everybody. Today is March 10th at 4:09.
Just open
We're
up.
Vehicle Subcommittee, and we are now streaming. So let's go ahead and start with House Bill 487. I know we have a lot of bills here, but I did make a promise last time that House Bill 487 would be the first bill out of the blocks, because last time we kind of got stuck on a bunch of easy pass stuff. So this is Delegate Foley's bill. I know there has been a lot of folks both on the towing side and the hauler side that have been trying to come closer and closer. I know they have made some progress. Delegate Foley, do you want to, and then I want to make sure that we hear from Andrea Mansfield and Louis Campion as well. But Delegate Foley, you want to set the stage for us on where we are with your bill?
Sure. So we have some amendments drafted, but they're going to change. But let me just go through what I think we have an agreement on with this bill. So to refresh your memory, this bill is about what we said was non-consensual towing, and I'm going to address that in a second. But this was about the billing. This was about whether or not releasing the cargo and the equipment and the rates, and whether or not that for these commercial tows, and this just deals with commercial vehicles and mainly, like big trucks, right?
Right.
That ship things. So here's what we've talked about, and I think we have an agreement on this, but not quite.
We have an amendment, Delegate Foley?
No, we don't have amendments yet, but I can tell you what the amendments will be, because we're in the process of talking to the parties to see if we can come up with one amendment that encompasses everything. Okay. Right. And we're still going back and forth. This has gone on, pretty long time. So we have agreed that everywhere in the bill that uses the term non-consensual tow, we would change the language to police initiated tow. Okay, so that'll go everywhere in the bill where it says non-consensual tow. We'll release it to police initiated tow. And we're going to eliminate the requirement.
Hold on, well, there, 1 second.
Yeah.
Andrea, Louis, Barbara, are everybody okay with that?
Yes, we are okay with that.
Okay, so that's number one.
Yes, my client as well.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we would do is we would eliminate the requirement that the state police establish the rates for the tows. Okay, so we're going to take that out of the bill because the state police don't want to do it, and there's some contention over that. So
okay.
So we've agreed to do that.
Okay,
and let me just finish, and then we can talk.
I'm doing one part at a time. Is there something?
Yeah, but this is part of that. Okay. So in lieu of that, we're going to suggest language that requires the towers applying to be on the Maryland State Police tow list that they submit a rate sheet. Okay. Now, where we have a contention is whether that rate sheet includes the per pound billing. That's the rub. But I think we're okay on submitting the rate sheet rather than having the state police set the tows.
Okay.
I think we have a disagreement on the per pound billing.
Okay, so Barbara, Louis, Andrea, are we good on that? We're not getting into the per pound billing yet, but are we good on the rate sheet? My understanding is we are. Is that correct from all of you?
If I could say, Mr. Chairman, with one clarification, because we haven't talked about the lien piece yet, and it would be impossible for us to allow a tow company to continue to have a lien if there is no rate setting. Like those are intrinsically linked, because they hold our equipment until we pay their fee. So if we're going to give up rate setting, which we are, willing to do that and provide the rate sheet, then they can't hold our equipment just universally hostage for whatever fees that they want. That's what has been going on. And
that, if I could just add to what Mr. Campion said, that's the big rub on this bill, is what happens with the holding of the cargo and the equipment. So I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. So
Here
Mr.
we go.
Chairman, you might want to
Yeah.
go at that with the party.
Yeah, I will. So it sounds to me like the two pieces that we're still are the holding of the cargo and the per pound billing. Is that correct? Those are the two outstanding issues.
I'm on a meeting.
And we,
I'm sorry.
yes, yeah, we did. Yeah, I mean, I think
Yes.
yes, those are the big issues. And I guess the issue that Louis just mentioned, that I know for motor truck had that the rate setting in the lien, like if there's no rate setting in the bill, they need to have the lien piece. And that's that's a sticking point as well.
Barbara, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'd like to hear more about the lien piece, if we're talking about an actual legal lien, or if we're just talking about holding onto the cargo, and if we're talking about liens with the cargo as well as the vehicle.
Okay. Louis, what are you specifically thinking about as far as a lien is concerned?
So the way the bill is written now is it specifically says that no lien is created. We don't believe that they have a lien under current Maryland law. And so the way the bill is written now is it references in the consumer protection article the lien provisions on motor vehicles and the like, and says that no lien is created. And we feel pretty strongly about that. We are willing to discuss. We don't believe a lien on cargo should exist in any circumstances, since we typically do not own that cargo, and that the company has to release to the owner or the owner's designee the cargo that they own, the tow company. We would be willing to work on a deposit to get our equipment back of the bill, because they still have an insurance claim, right? They still have an insurance claim that they are filing, and regardless of whether they are holding our equipment hostage or not, that claim, if it's legitimate, is going to be paid by a reputable insurance company.
Okay, let's step away from using the words like hostage, okay? Because that signifies there's some kind of ill intent, and I'd rather not make that leap just yet.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Andrea, what are your?
Yeah, actually, we just had a call and had a meeting with Louis and motor truck, and I think the sticking point. I know Louis mentioned a deposit, but what is a reasonable deposit? I don't think we really did not come up with a resolution to that point. I think that's something that, we just finished that call maybe 15 minutes before the subcommittee. So I think that would require some additional conversations, but I think my client, but I do think if they feel this process, you can get the writ of replevin. It's, it holds both parties accountable in that situation. So I think they have some concerns moving from that process, but in exactly what percentage would make sense, I think that's something that requires more discussion.
Okay, but there is willingness on all parties to discuss some kind of deposit based on a percentage of the value of the cargo.
I cannot commit to that right now. And actually, Vince Fluke is on here, as well as Charlie Parrish. I'm not sure if Vince would like to comment and weigh in on that more specifically. But I'm not in a position to make a commitment that we are willing to continuing to have that conversation at this point. I really need to talk with my client in more detail on that and where we would be. I think it raises a number of concerns. They're not sure. I mean, just in rough calculations, I know that Vince did earlier, sometimes the cargo could be up to 60% of the bill. So, and then to get a smaller percentage and have them be on the hook for not being paid for their services, I think it's a major concern for them as a business owner.
Okay. All right. Well,
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm still a little confused on the lien thing. Like, I understand, it's my understanding under current law, there's not automatically a lien created, not on the vehicle, not on the cargo, but there is an opportunity that a tower could go to court and get a lien, God forbid they would need it. I don't know if that's correct, but if Louis, you're just saying keep it the way it is, that's totally different than prohibiting towing companies from being able to pursue legal action.
Yeah, what we're suggesting is that you cannot hold, so let's not even use the term lien then.
Good.
You cannot hold cargo under any circumstances because we typically don't own that cargo and don't have we don't think that that legal right exists for you, but that you cannot hold our equipment with the payment of a deposit that we would be willing to work out a percentage of the invoice. Mr. Chairman, that's sort of where we are. So they
Thank
have
you.
a guarantee of upfront payment.
What is it currently? Can the tower hold cargo right now or not?
We don't believe they legally can, and that's being contested in federal court, but they do so all the time. They do it on both equipment and cargo. And then they know they have leverage against you because we can't make money.
In my understanding, kind of what Barbara was saying, I mean, if there is a dispute, the owner of the vehicle and so forth can get a bond. That bond is roughly 2%, and I know some it might be higher in some other banks or through other insurance companies, but roughly, from my understanding, it's approximately 2% of the bill. So we're talking, if it's a $70,000 bill, we're talking about $1,400 to $1,500 for the owner of the vehicle to get a lien. A bond. That holds both parties accountable. It ensures both parties, obviously, kind of has skin in the game until the issue and the dispute over the invoice is resolved.
Okay. Well, what I would suggest is, I know you have some work to do on that piece, Andrea and Barbara and those. Why don't you continue to work on that piece? And what about the per pound billing? I know that is that is like the big sticking piece here. Is that right?
There is a reluctance, Mr. Chairman, it seems, on the tower's part, from our observation, for them to discontinue the use of per pound billing.
Okay, so on the tower's part, what do you suggest to avoid what's happened in the past where one or two of the tow companies have I guess gone around the spirit of the law and done some gouging? What suggestions do you have to stop that from happening in the future? What would you recommend?
I think my client would prefer, I would think my client would say they are fully aware there are bad actors out there and that some of these issues probably need to be addressed, but they would prefer that they have the time to sit down, work with Maryland Motor Truck, work with the independent owner operators, and actually talk through a process, what makes sense. Should it be minimums and maximums? What other factors should be considered when determining what goes into a bill? If per pound, should not be, or should that be a component? But I think their preference would be that they can actually take more time, have conversations, and actually come up with a fair and equitable process that is workable for all parties.
Okay, so this is what I would say, Andrea, is that when was this bill originally heard? Because you guys have had a good 4 or 5 weeks to sit down and work through this. So the idea that you're going to delay this because you need more time, you've had a lot of time. I have been sitting in the background on a constantly asking Delegate Foley how it's going, reaching out to all parties involved. So what's going on? What's been going on the last 4 or 5 weeks?
We have been having conversations and talking with my clients, and I think they're sticking points.
Okay. Well, let me go to questions from the subcommittee to see if anybody has any questions. Obviously, this is a much more complicated bill than I thought was going in. But do we have questions, Delegate Learman? I know you just made a comment. Any further comments from you, Delegate Learman?
No, I just think this problem has been going on for several years, and I'm not really sure why the towers haven't, if it is indeed just a small group of bad actors. I'm not sure why the towing industry is willing to, sort of hold back this just for them. And I'm not sure why you haven't sort of figured this out, because it's a huge problem, and it needs to be fixed. And so I think we need to do something this year on this issue.
Thank you. I see Delegate Healy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. And I'm going to put it down now so I don't forget. The issue for me, one of the main issues for me is the cargo, the part that is, I just don't think that it's right at all. If nothing else gets done, I think that they should not be allowed to hold cargo that doesn't belong to the truckers who are just carrying it. Are people waiting for that? If it hasn't been damaged, and if it's perishable, it's going to rot in somebody's warehouse and do nobody any good. So I mean, how have you worked that part of it out yet?
Actually, so Mr. Chairman, could I ask if whether Mr. Fluke or Mr. Parrish would like to respond to some of those questions?
Sure.
Because they're the experts. They do this every day, and they may be able to give a better
Sure.
explanation. Than I.
Sure, to Delegate Healy's, let's stay with Delegate Healy's question, please. But yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm sorry. What was Delegate Healy's question? I was just jotting down Delegate Leon's question.
Her specific question was, what do you do to address a cargo that is not yours, that may be perishable? That cargo comes from the truckers that they have entered into contracting with somebody else. So it's not their cargo, and yet you're holding somebody else's cargo, and it could be perishable.
Yeah. So I mean, and Maryland Motor Truck would know better than me, but for me, I've never heard of anybody holding the perishable load. I think that they would be a fool to do so, because at the point that, like for me, if I had a perishable load and I hold it, I would presume that I'm going to be responsible at the point that it goes bad on my property. The other thing is, perishable loads, we really, for me and most towers that I know, we don't want to hold those anyway, because you've got to maintain that reefer. You've got to put fuel in it. You got to make sure it doesn't break down. You at the point it's in your care, custody, and control, you are responsible for it.
Okay, what if it's not perishable, but is timely? It needs to go somewhere in a timely manner.
So on something that's not perishable, we try to work with the trucking company, the insurance company as best we can to try to come up with a solution. Sometimes there's well, I mean, we could go on all day about different stories about dealing with, insurance companies and people.
Yeah, but if I could, please, the issue is it's not about that. It's about the people who bought that property, and they're waiting for it to be delivered. And I don't see how you have a right to hold it. It doesn't belong to the truck. It belongs to the people who bought it. I don't see how you can hold it at all. Can you explain to me, why you don't want to let go of that?
Well, I mean, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Vinny. Oh.
Okay. I mean, in a lot of situations, that's the only thing that is worth anything, so that we can make sure that we get paid. There's a lot of times when the tractor and the trailer are both totaled, and it's actually going to cost the insurance company or the owner money to remove it, more than what it's even worth. So it's easier for them just to abandon it. And that's what I was talking with Maryland Motor Truck earlier today about. Whenever you clean up a truck wreck, I mean, you got a lot of people are talking about price per pound. A typical tractor and trailer that's not loaded could weigh anywhere from, most of them 30 to 35,000 pounds. So the cargo on there can be up to, 45 is a typical load for most tractor trailers, 45,000 pounds, but they can haul up to 50,000 pounds of cargo. So, that can be a larger part of the job than actually cleaning up the tractor and the trailer by itself. With that said, at the point that, I mean, if the people have, and there's lots of good insurance companies out there, there's lots of times that, you got a good tower, good insurance company, the bill's paid, the load's gone right away. What I've seen is there are some bad insurance companies out there, and they just don't want to pay the bill. They want to do some long investigation to figure out if they even have coverage on that situation. And they want to dissect it down to if the driver was listed on the policy, the trailer, everything. And I'm talking, I mean, they take weeks to even see if they're going to even take responsibility for it, if they're going to, have coverage. So, they drag their feet, but at the point that everybody works together quickly, these things get solved pretty quick most of the time, I think.
Okay. Charles, do you have a comment really quickly before we move on?
Unmute there and get that. I basically was just, let me get my hand down too. These bills that we're talking about, that I saw that were submitted, and these are recoveries. And a lot of the times the cargo is the main part of this, because we're going 100 feet off the road, 100 feet down, which requires special equipment, expensive equipment. It's not that we're holding the cargo so much, and I made this statement actually to Delegate Foley in the beginning, and I didn't want it to come out to sound that way. It's not that it's being held so that we get paid. It's actually the majority of the work that we have to do is cleaning up that cargo, which is now debris on the roadways and on the side of the road. So it's not so much that the actual tow truck showing up is causing a 10, 20, 50, $100,000 bill. It's the cleanup of that debris so we can keep the traffic moving.
Okay. Are there any questions from any of the other delegates? Patrick, is there anything that the subcommittee needs to consider in all of this? I'm thinking that what my current thought process is that Andrea, Lewis, Barbara, everybody, this idea that you need more time to discuss this. I'm not buying that. You basically have until Tuesday to figure some things out. But I do want to give Patrick, our counsel, a chance to chime in to see if there's something that we all need to consider that we haven't discussed yet.
No, this is a pure policy dispute as far as I can tell.
Okay. Do the three of you plus, Vinny and Charles, do you guys need anything else from us before you put all your heads together between now and over the weekend to come to some decision? Otherwise, we'll just come to a decision.
Forgive me for not knowing already, but is the option of having an adjudication process, is that still on the table? Like having someone be responsible for hearing complaints and that sort of thing? I mean, because with the per pound towing, the per pound billing, I mean, it's helpful, but I understand if there are a couple of bad actors, you want us to figure out a way to get to the bad actors. Some kind of process might be an answer. Is that something? I guess my question is there any reason not to consider that?
No, I mean, that's up to you and Delegate Foley to discuss.
Thank you.
And that's in the bill. That's in the bill. I'm sorry, Mr.
In the original bill.
Yeah, the establishment of a complaint and disciplinary process by the state police.
Right. That's what I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, is that we didn't get to that part because I don't think that didn't seem to be that contentious, because if we don't get past the cargo part and the per pound billing, we don't get to that. But the bill does contemplate a dispute resolution process.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I address Delegate Learman's question about holding back cargo? Or I'm sorry, holding back for a couple of bad apples?
Sure, but please make it quick because we have a lot of other bills, and I know you guys. The sooner
I'll
we finish up with this, the sooner you can all get together and work this out.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to add, she had said about, that all the towers are holding back. Basically, I think her question was kind of like, why are we protecting a couple of bad actors? And so there are a lot of good tow companies that use the price per pound billing. There's only a few that abuse it. And so we're not holding back for those couple that are abusing it. We're holding back for the legitimate people that utilize it the way it's meant to be used and conduct a good, positive business with it.
Yeah, I get that, Vinny. And the only thing I would suggest is, in that case, put your thinking caps on and figure out how to not hurt your fellow towers that are doing the right thing. But how do you police your own profession and and get rid of those that are the bad actors. I don't know the answer to that. I think that, you know, you are in much better position to figure out how to address the bad actors than we are. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you all very, very much. Okay, let's go to the next bill, HB 335, Transportation Authority Easy Pass Disputes of Charges and Fees. Patrick, are we good on this bill? Are there any questions? Do we have any amendments? I'm checking for amendments.
Well, we have some amendments that we discussed at the last meeting. They're fairly straightforward.
Can you explain very quickly what the bill is, just to get everybody up to speed?
Well, this is a bill that came in. It did 3 years to dispute an Easy Pass account transaction. The first amendment, as we saw last week, takes it down to 1 year. Second amendment puts the effective date from October to June 1st this year. And then the third puts on a 1-year sunset on the entire bill.
Okay, yeah, this is the one we discussed the other day.
Yeah, correct. And we were talking about the 120 days, and then I think with the 120 days they were testifying to, and we might want to ask Will here to comment on that and correct me if need be.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. I really appreciate it. And
I was going to say, Will, I was just going to say that I don't think it was totally clear, but it was for Maryland residents who want to contest the violation of the state. It was saying they would be limited to 120 days, and because that's what that state's rules are under the consortium, whatever it is. And
that's correct. So good afternoon, Chairman and members of the subcommittee. Again, for the record, I'm Will Pines, acting executive director for MDTA. So MDTA is a part of the group, what's called the Interagency Group, IAG, and the IAG limits disputes that are for transactions that occur out of state to 120 days. This policy from the agencies is in place. I got the intent of why do they have that is to allow different states have different reporting requirements, and allows them to close their quarterly statements within 1 month after issuance. And so what does this mean for customers? For their travels, Maryland Easy Pass customers, for their travels out of state, those travels are disputed with that state that they traveled in. So for example, if you're a Maryland Easy Pass customer and you travel on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, then you must resolve any issue that you have with that travel with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. The MBTA is not able to process any dispute for an out-of-state travel because we only receive the limited transaction file information from that out-of-state travel that allows for us to post something on the statement. We don't receive the full record of that travel and all the associated charges, like the toll rate files, the images associated with the travel. All of that record of information stays with the vendor that provides the tolling services for that home state. So just like if somebody from New Jersey travels into Maryland and they call us to resolve any dispute that they may have for a Maryland travel, if you travel on the George Washington Bridge in New York, then you need to call that tolling entity to resolve that travel. So the core issue, the exception that we were asking the subcommittee to consider is to have an exception for travels out of state, so that we're not talking about disputes that we don't have any control over. So we talked about
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Talked about a couple different ways to do that. One way is the bill talks about the terms and conditions for Easy Pass accounts shall allow a person to dispute a charge or fee. If there were a limitation after that that said for use of a Maryland toll facility, that would be much closer to something that we could live with, because you're really limiting it at that point to something that we actually have control over.
Okay. Are there any questions on that issue? Delegate Foley, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Pines, if that's the case, then why do Illinois and New York, and you use New York as an example, have a 180-day dispute period if it's 120 days?
I don't know, just like this law would set to where Maryland would be able to offer longer than 120 days. Certainly another state can have a different dispute process for themselves, but they can't hold Maryland to require 180 days. That's not how it works. Maryland with that state would be limited to 120 days. By this law, we would obviously include out of state folks if we did that, but we don't have any control over what another state's laws are or what they publish and what their timeframes are. But the interagency group dispute resolution is 120 days. So you name 2 states, 2 toll facilities, possibly. I don't know all of the rules in different states, but the 120 days rule is the IAG member rule.
Well, but I'm saying that they presumably belong to the IAG and they have 180 days dispute period. So that seems to not, I mean,
And what I'm getting at is in the exact same way that this bill would make us offer 1 year, right? Not even 180 days. We could also reduce it to 180 days. We would, by what I had suggested by saying for a Maryland toll facility, we would then be offering those out of state folks the 1 year that's proposed by the bill. But
you don't need to do
we
it.
can't control New York and other folks to go beyond the 120 days.
And we don't need to do that for out-of-state folks. Like that's their issue.
Mr. Chair, I don't think that's what he's saying. I think what he's saying is any tolls, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Pines, if I go on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and the tolls get charged on my Easy Pass, you are saying that I'm limited to 120-day dispute with Maryland Easy Pass, because that's who my transponder is. I have an Easy Pass account with Maryland, that I can't go beyond the 120-day dispute period for those tolls. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that you as a Maryland Easy Pass customer would not be able to dispute that beyond 120 days with the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
Right.
Right. You're not disputing it with Maryland. I don't have a way to resolve your toll in Pennsylvania. If you call me, I'm going to say, thank you for your call. We see that this was a Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission transaction. You need to call them to resolve this issue. And if you called them, they would say, you're beyond 120 days. We don't have any transaction information on you. We're sorry, you're not able to dispute this. They may say that. They may not. If they have a law that requires them to have 180 days, they may have the information. I don't know what every state does.
Okay. All right. So what is the subcommittee's pleasure?
Can I?
Yes.
I'd like to ask Mr. Pines, just in passing, you mentioned that an alternative would be to have Maryland be 180 days, just as the other couple states are. And is that acceptable? Would that be something that would not interfere with your bonding and all of those other things that we're so concerned about?
Well, as Secretary Ports mentioned at the last meeting, our bonding considers any legislative action. The current statute sets up that the Maryland Transportation Authority Board has the authority to set policy. They have fiduciary responsibilities. They set the rules for the authority. We have our own funding stream. We're separately governed entities. So I know, frankly, any legislation that's passed has a risk of demonstrating that the board is not actually effective as a governing body of the authority, and that there's other entities that have the authority to control our finances. And so it would be better to be 180 days because it's much closer to being consistent with what I'm hearing Delegate Foley say is what other states do and the IAG rules, but it doesn't completely negate the trust agreement concern.
Okay, that one other question about the trust agreement. You know, at the beginning of the Hogan administration, Governor Hogan took credit for lowering the fees on all the toll facilities. He put signs up and thank you, Governor Hogan. did that interfere with the trust agreement because he was asserting that it was his initiative and not the authority that was doing that?
So no, and the reason is the members of the MDTA board are appointed by the governor. And if the governor requests the board and the board votes to alter toll rates, which they did in this case that you're referring to, then that was a board action that changed the tolls at the request of the governor, but nonetheless as an action of the board. So that's different. So if the legislature came to the MDTA board and said, we really want you to be not 120 days, we want you to have a policy of 1 year, and the MDTA board enacted that policy, then that would negate the concern with the trust agreement.
But of course, the way you phrase that the governor, because the governor appointed the board, is it not independent once he's appointed them, that he can come in and ask them to do something and they do it?
No, they certainly are an independent board, and they represent a wide cross section from the state, different members of background in construction and engineering and finance and auditing and all those kind of things. And they act completely independently and make decisions that I don't have control over, and certainly nobody else does. They are independent. When I said that they're appointed by the governor, I just simply was pointing out that certainly any governor, historical or current, picks individuals that generally represent their vision and goals for the agency.
So they wouldn't be intimidated by the governor making a request.
Well, that's
the question.
That's suspect. So
I'm thank you very much. I'm not going to ask any more questions.
Delegate Love.
Chair, I put my hand down because I was going to do this offline, but I am now confused. I thought I understood Mr. Pines's statement about out of state, but then there was Mr. Pines, when you were describing your last, you said something about you can't go beyond the 180 days because that's the rule that's set within this group. But then you said, well, maybe New York holds it for longer because that's what their law is. So now I'm confused.
Yeah.
And let me try to clarify that. Thank you for the question. So what I'm getting at is all of the group, the IAG, is only committed to holding it 120 days.
Minimum.
That means minimum. No one can hold it for only 90 days or only 60 days. Okay.
For somebody to dispute from another state.
That's correct.
In New York, let's say Delegate Foley drives up to New York and gets one, and then she theoretically has a minimum of 120 days to dispute that charge with the state of New York.
That's correct.
Okay.
The point is that the law as drafted, the bill as drafted, seems to imply, MDTA believes that it implies that we would offer even Maryland customers for a travel out of state. There's no limitation on where the travel is. You're a Maryland Easy Pass customer. Anywhere you travel, we're going to let you dispute it for a year. And that's a problem because we can't guarantee that you can dispute out of state.
Now I understand. Got it. Thank you very much for that explanation. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question of Mr. Pines?
Yeah, and then we have to move on.
Okay, but he said something different than what was said in the hearing that we had earlier. Because in the hearing that we had earlier, Mr. Port said that this bill would not affect the bonding and would not affect the trust agreement. And now you're saying something different. So I just want to be clear that I think we left that meeting with the understanding that, yes.
Let me clarify that point. I'm glad you brought it up. So the trust agreement, there are concerns about actions that lead to free passage. And there were a number of bills that were discussed when we kind of went through, you remember last meeting, we went through methodically and we talked about each bill. Some of the bills would lead to tolls being waived that would offer free passage. That is a blatant and overt violation of our trust agreement. More subtly than that is the fact that our MDTA board has the statutory authority to set policy for how we operate. So it's up to our bonding agencies to review us and make the determination on whether or not this legislative action is a breach of the board's authority or not. And so there's a trust issue in terms of the legislature making decisions in lieu of the board doing that. And then there's a separate issue about whether something offers free passage or not, which is a much more overt breach of our trust agreement.
But I just want to be clear that when we discussed this, okay, Mr. Port said it did not affect the bond or the trust, and that if we put the sunset in, which is why we put the sunset in, that you all would be okay with this. That's what he said. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, but that's, I think, the impression, that's what we left.
Yeah, and that's why this bill was, we were just getting, I thought this bill was going to be 2 minutes and we we're going to vote.
Right,
that.
right.
That's why you could probably see some level of frustration right now, Mr. Pines, because this is kind of coming off of the rails of what we discussed the other day.
Yeah, and Delegate Foley, I'm not saying, I hope, let's just be clear, I'm not saying that this is like a massive concern for the MDTA. And I apologize if I'm conveying that. I just want to be clear that I think if you went back and you reviewed the video, Secretary Ports did indicate that any legislative action could be viewed as a breach of the trust. And that's just a fact. It's not saying that this bill is a particularly alarming thing, because I don't, for Maryland travels, I don't see it as a financial.
Let's just do this. We need to move on. So we're going to hold this bill until we can figure this out, because I've got 9 other bills that we have to get through.
Mr. Chairman,
Laying all those bills. Yes, Delegate Parrott.
I'm ready to just move forward with this thing and pass it with the amendments. Could I make a movement that we just do that?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Patrick, are there any concerns that we're not aware of?
Patrick, you're
muted.
I think he is not on.
May I clarify, is that with an
Oh, he's
amendment that we're limiting to Maryland travels?
Which is what I was saying when I was.
Yes. Is that what you're saying, Patrick?
That was what I was asking, yes.
Okay, so is there anything that we're not considering here that we haven't discussed that you haven't mentioned yet? Otherwise, we're going to move forward.
No, we have the Maryland only language, the sunset, the June 1st effective date, and the 3 years to 1 year.
Okay, so we have a
Ask
first.
Mr. Pines to repeat his language so I can take it down exactly.
Sure. If you said after on page 2, line 5, after the word fee, if you wrote for use of a Maryland toll facility.
Okay, so we have those 3 pieces in one amendment. We have a first, we have a second. Is there any further discussion on the amendments? Patrick, we're clean, right?
Vote on amendments, vote on the bill, and we're going.
Okay. Go. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, how many people do we have?
You have 7.
3, 4, 5. We have enough. We have quorum.
We got enough. We're good.
Okay.
We're missing
Okay.
Baltimore. We don't have Learman and Boyce.
That'd be bad. We're
And
good.
Love just left.
Yeah, but we have quorum. So, okay, on the bill as amended. So that's the amendment. On the bill as amendment, is there a motion?
Motion. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so it carries. I want to drop down because we have some folks here that are waiting to another Delegate Foley bill, the Bill 870 Foley's bill, vehicle towing or removal, security parties, electronic notification. Is there discussion on this bill? Are there any amendments on this bill? Patrick, is there anything we need to know about?
Yes, sir. Amendments on the bill that were sent out earlier. So sick of these buses outside. We basically just reworked the language. The towers were a little concerned that the way the bill was structured and worded, that it would require them to still do the 3 mailings and do the electronic. And obviously the intent of the bill is to do electronic. So we reworded the bill, the language, Molly sent it out earlier. It's this House Bill 870, the reprint for it. with,
Strikes assessed and substitutes received.
kind of move things around to make sure that this was for the towers and the secured parties. If they do it electronically, that's all they have to do.
Okay, and that's the strike on page 2, line 20, strikes assessed and substitutes received. No, that's a different bill.
That's
Never mind.
Delegate Parrott's bill.
Yep, that's a different bill. Okay. All right. Any questions on the amendments? I'm not hearing anything from the gallery, meaning anyone else. Okay, on the amendments, is there a first? Anyone move the amendments?
I move the amendments.
Okay. Is there a second, maybe?
I'll second it.
Okay. On the amendments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions on the bill as amended? Going once. Going twice.
I'll move favorable on the bill as amended.
Oh, thank you.
I was waiting for somebody else to do it.
I don't understand.
Sorry, I was asleep. I was waiting on Neil to do it. I was waiting on Neil to do it.
So I have a first and a second. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? House Bill 870 passed subcommittee. Okay,
For the record, the cross file of that bill is coming out too. It's coming out clean. We'll do the same amendment on the Senate bill.
yeah, it's a little amendment. Okay. Let's move to Delegate Lehman, House Bill 404, Vehicle Laws Speed Limit Establishment. Patrick?
Yeah, this bill. Okay, we had an amendment from Delegate Lehman to clarify that the limitation on speed cameras was only when they reduced the speed limit to less than 25 miles per hour. And then I noticed something before last week's meeting. This is a House Bill 404 with the reprint for 113720 at 12:14 p.m. That there was language above that needed to be deleted because that talks about after a traffic and engineering investigation, anybody or any local jurisdiction can decrease the limit outside of an urban district to not less than 25 miles per hour. And that contradicts what this bill is doing. So I struck that from the bill, or from the law.
Okay.
So you made it consistent in which way? Just so I understand.
Well, if you leave that in there, then it says that outside of an urban district, you can't reduce it to less than 25 miles an hour.
Oh, I see.
The bill that we have
That's
is saying you could
current law.
reduce it to 15.
To 15.
It's the current law because this 15 law currently only applies to Montgomery.
Oh,
this-
And this would allow it to apply to Prince George's as well.
okay, it's fine with me. 25 is better than 15.
Okay, so Patrick, just to be clear, it allows it to go down to 15.
That's what the bill does, correct?
And this
Oh,
would make it
I don't want it to go down to 15. I want to stick at 25.
Well, but this would, if we went down to 15, it would make it consistent with Montgomery County's bill,
Oh,
right?
so it wouldn't be this, yeah, it wouldn't be different in one place than another. Okay, I get
Yeah,
it.
and it's not required, it's just authorizing.
Oh,
Is that correct, Patrick, what I just said?
That it would make it consistent, yes,
So the Prince George's would be in the same posture as current Montgomery County law.
correct.
okay.
Are you okay with that, Ann?
Yeah, well, let me just talk about it for a second. The issue, when we set this before, there were places before we modeled ourselves on Montgomery. When this was first initiated, there were places where they dropped the speed limit down to 15 miles an hour, which was way too slow if you're going down a steep hill. And it just was like, so we said 20. I think we said 20 or 25. I forget what it was for the use of a speed camera. And so I'm just trying to square that in my mind as to what the effect of this is. This is saying 25 miles an hour. No, it's not. It's saying
it's not.
you can lower it to 15 miles an hour.
And it has nothing to do with speed cameras unless you want to raise it, unless you want to put in a speed camera later, in which case that's a whole other piece.
Oh,
of
that's a
it.
different story. Okay,
this doesn't have
it
anything to
has
do with
nothing to
speed
do with
cameras.
speed cameras. I'm
Right.
sorry. That's what got me confused. Never mind.
Okay. All right, so the amendments, you had that one amendment you fixed, right, Patrick?
Yes.
Okay, so what has everybody thought? Is there any discussion, or can we have a motion on the amendment?
Just discussion.
Yes, sir.
I voted against this one last year. I know it's a local bill, but I don't like 15 miles an hour on big roads. So I'm going to go against it this time as well.
Okay, I understand.
Well,
And
for the
just so
record,
you
it's not a
know-
local bill this year.
Okay.
And just so you know, the reason that was last year is because there were a few outstanding roads in Montgomery County that they made the argument for that just 25 was just too fast. And I know those roads, and I think those were kind of anomalous situations, but they were situations. So every once in a while, that's what's needed. But okay, so did we get a motion on the amendments?
I'll move the amendments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Neil, you are opposed. Anyone else opposed?
Well, this is just for the amendment, so I'm okay with the amendments.
You're okay with the amendments? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm voting for, so therefore I'm abstaining.
Okay, we'll get to the next piece. This is, all right, so the amendments passed, just so you know, Delegate Boyce, we are on HB 404, Layman's Bill, Vehicle Laws, Speed Limits Establishment. We just passed the amendments. Now we're on the bill as amended.
I'll move favorable.
Okay. Is there a second? If we don't have a second. then-
Move on favorable.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is there any discussion on the bill as amended? All right, all those in favor of House Bill 404, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
First.
Okay, and any abstentions? Okay, great. Let us go down to, I want to just kind of go out of order, but I'd like to go to HB 1150, Delegate Jacobs' bill, vehicle equipment, and then I want to go to Delegate Stein's vehicle equipment, highway maintenance and service, green light flashing. I'd like to have a discussion about this. I'm okay with it. I think it's great. I don't have any issues unless others do. What does everybody think?
Yeah, I'd love to see it pass on St. Patrick's Day, but
Any other thoughts, concerns?
Maybe we can do a demo on St. Patrick's Day.
Pilar, so you pop in.
I said,
Yeah.
maybe we,
I'm just here with Miss Baldwin from SHA and just here to answer any questions on this one.
Okay. Is there anything we should be aware of from SHA on this bill?
No, we're totally supportive of this bill.
Okay.
It's an authorizing bill.
Mhm.
Would allow us to use the two tones, and maybe we'll bring one down on the 17th. It passes.
Wonderful.
there you go.
Delegate Foley, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just have one question of Delegate Jacobs, and I'm not opposed to this bill, but I just want to be clear what I'm voting on. So these green lights, the green flashing lights are in addition to other lights that are also on the vehicle, right? Is that
They
correct?
have- Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. They have
Okay.
to be, it has to be equal. So
Equal.
if there were 4 total lights, there would be 2 green and 2 yellow.
Okay, because I don't want people to get it mixed up like with the green lights, flashing green lights. You know what I mean?
No,
Yeah.
I think we also have experts on it. If I'm telling you incorrectly, they could step in, but I'm pretty sure that
Okay.
I'm correct with that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Patrick, anything we need to consider, any amendments or anything, or are we good?
No, I think the committee has to practice making motions.
I think so.
Move favorable.
There you go.
Second.
That's how it's done.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Okay, bill carries. Thank you. Let's go to Delegate Stein, vehicle laws, lighting privately owned vehicles and volunteer fire equipment. I know, Patrick, we were waiting on a letter. Did we get that letter?
Yes, we did.
And that letter,
From the Fire and EMS Caucus supporting the bill.
okay, and to be clear, this does not allow volunteers to use lights traveling to or from, specifically to. It only allows them to use lights when they're on the scene, correct?
Yeah, these are the fire police that like direct traffic around the commotion and everything.
Volunteers.
And yes, only at the scene.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to make sure that we made that very, very clear because I was a little bit concerned that some folks might take those lights and maybe get a little squirrely with them. So, but with that being the way it is, I'm okay with the bill and I'd like to entertain any discussion.
Move the bill.
Second.
Okay, Patrick, we don't have any amendments on this one either, right?
This is clean too.
Okay, great. Okay, but first and a second, any discussion on the bill? All those in favor of the bill signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, HB 1066 passes. Okay. Let's go to the St. Mary's County Delegation Bill 475. This bill, I know I have, and I think others probably have some concerns with this bill because this isn't the traditional kind of bill that we use with golf carts that we vote on. But this one is more authorizing for the county, which I think brings up some concerns because it gives up a lot of authority to the county as opposed to the General Assembly. Patrick, can you correct me if I'm wrong or if I misstated that in any way? And let's have some discussion.
No,
I'm ready to vote on favorable.
Is there any discussion on the bill from our members?
Is there a way to modify it so it's not as far reaching as we feel it is?
It's a local bill and really.
Yeah, okay.
All right, the bill's going once. Bill, yes,
I
Delegate.
have a question.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I have a question. So we have another we have another golf cart bill too, don't we?
We have
This is
several.
The only one.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was my question. Okay. Thank you.
Sure, Delegate Parrott.
Thank you. Yeah, my question was, do they have a specific area in St. Mary's County that they're looking for? That we could just narrow it down to that one road or something?
Well, that's why I said to Delegate Boyce that there's no way to fix it because there isn't. They're asking for the authority to name it themselves. We actually have already authorized an area in St. Mary's County for golf carts.
Okay.
That a couple years ago, Golden Beach, Tucson Knolls. But yeah, they're asking for the authority themselves and they don't name any areas at all.
Okay.
We've been very
Seeing no
careful
interest in
about
that. I'm sorry. Delegate Healy, did you have something you want to add?
I just wanted to say that we've been very, very careful about really making sure that we're not putting anybody at risk when we put, and I just turning that over to the counties where because once one county gets it, they'll all want their own and they'll all be doing it differently. And it will be, you'll start seeing golf carts in all kinds of places. And I just don't think that that's the safe thing. I think the state should keep control over it and deal with it on a one-by-one basis. That's just my opinion.
Okay, well, seeing no motion, the bill going once, bill going twice, and the bill is gone. No motion. Okay, what do we have left? Delegate Charles's 1032 State Highway Administration Highway Cleanup Record Reporting. This is a little bit complicated, Patrick, just because there seems to be some concern that MoCo is getting one thing over Prince George. Do you want to chime in here and let's dig in?
Well, that was even stated at the hearing, but the bill is statewide, to be clear. It applies to all statewide and it basically requires reporting on the records that State Highway keeps and maintains, detailing, the processes procedures and expenditures they make cleaning highways, state highways, in the different districts, the different counties. And then they have to publish on its website the list of the maintenance projects in progress and schedules, and then report to the General Assembly on this issue every year. It does have a fiscal, it is on 250. It's,
Much.
Contrast good aim, it's 225. And I believe that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I can't, for some reason, my laptop makes, all I can see.
You
is
have State
small.
Highway here on the call.
Okay, Pilar?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Delegate Parrott.
Thank you. I mean, would this include like, they clean the highways using nonprofit groups, like where you adopt a highway? Would this try and include that also?
Well, they mentioned that in their testimony as part of the program. I guess that would be part of the report, I would think. And probably some prison labor too, which, as their testimony noted, has kind of tapered off the last couple of years with COVID, but would probably pick back up again fairly soon.
Pilar, do you have some comment?
Yeah, I mean, and Mitch is on here as well from State Highway. I mean, I think we would just, we don't have a formal position on the bill. I think that we view this one as maybe just being unnecessary. You know, we do have schedules and processes and procedures that regarding our litter program and at all the districts. And if anyone ever requested those, that information, we would certainly provide it. So, you know, yep, sorry.
Somebody say something, Delegate?
Yeah, Delegate Healy, did you have a question?
I just wanted to explain that this has been a very sore spot for Prince George's County over the years. I've been to many delegation meetings with the county executive. Litter is a big issue, and there are people who, you know, you drive along Route 50, and when you cross the county line, it's visibly better in Anne Arundel than it is in Prince George's. The same thing in other areas around Prince George's. It has been a sore spot, and I think that this is just an expression of the frustration that no matter what we do, we get answers, but we don't have real data to show that the answers that we're getting are accurate, because it doesn't look that way to our residents. That's the history of where this bill, I believe, is coming from.
Delegate, if I could, I would like to follow up with you on the actual numbers, the dollars that we spend, like statewide, broken down by county. I don't have it offhand, but I believe we spend more in Prince George's than we do in Montgomery, and more in Prince George's than we do in Anne Arundel as well. A lot of times, just because of the way we do business with different contractors, and we're looking at some different models for like areas like the Capitol Beltway, doing basically a contract for everything on like all maintenance on a bigger road like the Beltway, just because it takes so much resources. But since the districts for State Highway are broken down by the county, Route 50 in Prince George's County is maintained by District 3, and in Anne Arundel County it's maintained by District 5. So there is kind of a challenge there in terms of scheduling. Like we have
I think that's why I just think that I'm just trying to explain where the bill is coming from the perspective of the Prince George's County, because it's been a very frustrating experience over the last several years. And I think when people go back to their districts and they have to answer to their constituents, it would be good to be able to point to data, and that people could go to a website and see, yeah, they're picking up litter every 3 weeks in Prince George's and every 3 weeks in Montgomery, or whatever it is. I'm not saying, that's just an example, but I think it's just something that would be very helpful for the public to know that they're not being singled out or anything like that. And then there's proof, and it's a good thing.
Delegate Parrott.
I wonder, I hear that concern loud and clear that Prince George's County, it seems like it's not as clean as the other counties. And I've driven through there a lot, so I can relate to that. I understand that. I wonder if we could, instead of passing this bill this year, just make a formal request from the committee that they keep Prince George's County, make an effort to make it more clean than they have in the past.
Well, Matt,
I think that's an insulting way to say it, but it's not that we're not clean.
Hold on a second. Hold.
Right now.
Everybody, hold on a second. Matt, you said you had some data that you can get us that specifically talks about what you're doing in the various counties?
Yeah, so I believe I can provide basically like a number that we spend on litter cleanup per county. That would be, I'm assuming, very helpful in this situation.
You have schedules and the like too?
Yeah, so as far as the schedule goes, typically the routine cleanup, if you will, is every 4 to 6 weeks, but obviously that depends on weather and everything else. The other thing that we should mention is as well as the routine maintenance, we're also doing responding to requests constantly. When somebody puts in our CCMS customer care system, there's litter at X, Y, and Z address, please clean it up. Well, if we shift the crew to go clean up the litter at that address, then obviously that kind of takes away from their time to work the regular schedule. So we kind of, in a way, already have like a system to track, where and when we're cleaning up litter.
Well, you can make it public easily then.
So I don't know how easy that would be, but I can certainly ask that question.
Okay. Why don't you do that and then get back to us on Monday? We'll hold the bill until Tuesday, and then we'll either vote it out or go from there. But I do see Delegate Boyce's hand up.
I guess I wanted to, I've been listening to Delegate Healy. I feel like I don't understand that there seems to be an inequity of cleaning, but I guess I'm only going to push back a little bit to say size and what is being cleaned in one place versus another. Does another place have more highway roads than someone else? Does someone else have more accidents than someone else? I guess I want to respectfully understand the problem we are solving, because I'd like to solve it, but I'm not sure I understand what the actual issue is, or maybe the barrier or the challenge.
Well, why don't we get all that data for Tuesday or Monday, depending. I'll talk with Patrick about when our next meeting is. Can you get all that together, man?
Yeah, I should be able to have you some on Monday.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Mitch.
Did you have anything else? Okay, hands down. Okay, so we're gonna hold that for now. And then the two other things, Delegate Parrott, we need to hold 9:25. Where are you? I'll talk to you about it. We just should get together. I'll call you afterward to kind of talk through some things so we can figure out what to do with it. Okay. And then last but not least, House Bill 1121. This is going to take a little bit of discussion. I know that this was a really good hearing and a lot of people want to move forward with this, but I do have some of the community that came out and had some concerns as the bill is drafted. And I do want to remind the committee, which is probably, it seems like so long ago, but back as the pandemic hit, we passed a bill, and I don't remember what it was called, like the blue card bill or something along those lines, so that folks could have a blue card and they could hand that to a police officer when the police officer pulled them over. But that, we literally passed that bill as COVID just kind of blew up the world. So I don't know what the current status of that is. And I know, so let's just have a quick conversation. I will say that I do know that there's a lot of interest from committee members to passing some version of this bill. So with that said, Delegate Foley, and this is our last bill of the night, by the way, this is our last bill.
Yeah, I'm just going to comment and kind of echo what you said, Mr. Chairman. I have also been contacted, as I'm sure you have, from a lot of organizations that represent the disabled, and they do have a lot of problems with this bill. I'm a co-sponsor on the bill, and I admit I didn't realize what the consequences would be. So I think that we need to look at this very, very carefully before we do anything.
Okay, is there a question, specific question?
No, sir, just a comment on, yeah.
Okay, I know I talked with Rachel earlier. Rachel, do you want to, unless there's another question? Oh, no,
I think Delegate Boyce has a question.
Yeah, I see Delegate.
Oh,
Boyce.
sorry.
Thank you so much. I have to disagree a little bit. One community supports it and one community doesn't support it. And it feels like it's a difference of opinion versus the actual issue. So I understand that the autism community, for instance, supports this, and the disability committee has concerns because there may be a call out, or there may be some type of feel that someone is putting their physical challenge on display, but it is an option. It is not a mandate. And so if someone who is driving wants to have that option to put that on there, they have the choice to, but they don't have to. And so I feel like the need to stress that this is it's an option. It is not a mandate.
That's right. And I will say that I think the bill hearing was extraordinarily impactful, very extraordinarily impactful. I mean, so with that said, I know I had an earlier conversation. Well, let's go to Pilar and then let's go to Rachel. Pilar, you have your, do you want to, and I will say, I did look at the back of my driver's license. There's plenty of places to do something if should we elect to do something. There's space. The question is much more technical and then the larger picture, but go ahead.
Sure. So I would just obviously stand by a written testimony, but I did want to point out there was one, and I don't remember exactly where it was during the bill hearing in the testimony, but I believe there was a statement made that, we don't provide, or MVA doesn't share transactional history. And I just wanted to clarify that we do share transactional history with entities like the judiciary and law enforcement through the Driver Privacy Protection Act. And so I think there was some discussion as like, if someone made this notation, but then wanted to take it off at a later date, would that transaction, or would that history of them at once having that notation on their license still live in the universe? And it would, through this, through the transactional history that, could and would be shared if it needed to be through judiciary and law enforcement. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So would there be any way to not share it?
I don't believe so, because I think all the transactional history through the MVA would be available through this, and it's through regulation. I believe the Driver Privacy Protection Act. So I don't think there's any way that we can withhold one part of the transaction or history of the transaction with a customer.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
to add on to what Pilar just said, that's kind of the difference here, is that this bill is going through the driver's licensing system, which is through a lot of federal and state law, has to comply with and has to go obey. Whereas the blue card legislation from 2 years ago, whether it's flawed now or not, was outside of the driver's licensing system.
Okay,
Correct.
that makes sense. Rachel, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think to that point, I think that was one of the reasons we ended up with the blue cards and not a licensing designation, was because of the concern that it was going to live on forever. But I do want to start, and for those of you that don't know, I'm Rachel London. I'm the Executive Director of the Developmental Disabilities Council and the Chair of the Developmental Disabilities Coalition. The coalition is the one that submitted the testimony. And we absolutely want better interactions, but we do, I think I pulled out our bucket of concerns into three. The privacy issues with the fact that the data remains in the system. Then it's coupled with if a parent puts a designation on an ID for a minor, what happens when that minor turns 18 if they don't want that designation anymore? Is it automatically removed? or what will they have to do? What steps will they have to take? And then, of course, it lives in the system. And then the third part in the kind of privacy issues is, you might remember in the original legislation, prior to what passed in 2020, there were some concerns that we were attempting to address around the medical advisory board and using that information, whether it was disclosed through a license and whether that could be a basis for referring a person to the medical advisory board, that list of, I think it's like 18 conditions where you have to disclose those, that has to be on your license because it could impact your ability to drive. And whether there was going to be any kind of correlation. So I think we would have to have something that says it would not be disclosed as a basis for referring a person. So there's the privacy issues. I think the second really big issue for our developmental disabilities community is it's really broad, not broad enough, right? If you're going to do it, why are we limiting just to people with autism? A variety of other states have used kind of the invisible disability route, right? So Wisconsin describes behaviors rather than labels of people. You don't, so you wouldn't be requiring a diagnosis or a label of a disability, but you, they have things like whether you're blind or whether you might react in a certain way when you're anxious or in a stressful situation. So I think that broadening it is another piece that we've talked about. And the third, and I think this is really the biggest piece, is having a designation or an ID or using the blue card doesn't actually help or do anything unless law enforcement officers know to look for it and they know what it means. So, you know, we have done a lot, we being the disability community, on training for law enforcement. However, without actually requiring that training on how to interact with someone with a disability or how to use the information they may get from either the ID or the blue card, that it doesn't really do any good. I think that there is a fear to my colleagues with disabilities that without that kind of required training on how to interact with someone with a disability or how to use that information regarding a disability, people are going to be afraid to disclose. And so we're, you know, if the point is for people to voluntarily, and we know that, disclose, we want to make sure that we are inclusive enough that people would want to. So there are a variety of states, Colorado and Alaska and Connecticut, that require within whether they have an identification designation on the ID or whether they use a blue card or envelope. Some states use envelopes. Their legislation passed with mandated training and awareness.
And that's what's lacking here in Maryland, as you're saying. How is the blue card today after 2 years, again, in the middle of a pandemic? Is that what you're saying? We just don't have training and we don't have as much outreach to law enforcement?
And the truth is we, you know, it's very, very hard to find on the MVA website. Some of it aren't even on the local websites. Yeah, and there's been no real outreach or public education or any training specifically about the blue cards.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions. The first one for Pilar. I thought under the Driver's License Privacy Act, yes, there are situations where that information would be turned over, but it's very specific and very tight. It's not just, you know, out there for anybody. It's, you know, turned over to law enforcement in specific situations, you know, upon a warrant or something else like that.
Correct. Yeah, it's not like available to the public if someone just asks for it. It's specifically for in instances where we do, you know, share information with judiciary on the court side, and then obviously with law enforcement. That's correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then my second question. Hi, Rachel. Nice to see you again. It was my understanding that we actually had this training mandated for law enforcement. And am I incorrect about that?
There are a variety of trainings developed, and they are on interacting with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Thankfully, the commission has worked very closely with the Sailor Alliance and things like that to get as many people trained as possible by people with disabilities. But there is no training about the blue cards. There's no training about, there's sort of that kind of, some jurisdictions are requiring it, but it is not a statewide requirement. And they're not, and I think, like the chair said, you guys passed this bill during a pandemic. And so none of that was included in those trainings.
Okay, but there is training on ways to interact. There's just not specific training on the blue card.
Correct. And not every, not, I think some of the local law enforcement provides more in-depth training than others.
Got it. Thank you.
Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I speak for the chair and the committee when I say we want to get this figured out, because I think this is something we take very seriously and want to pass. So I would personally, respectfully would like to hear solutions, because the story was too horrifying for me. Right? And I can imagine that in any scenario, nonetheless, driving a car. And so I would like to hear what we can do versus what is wrong with this bill. And we need to know what we need to do, because it's too important. It is too important. It is too important. And so when we talk about, the delegate just talked about training, if this is already in our purview and we can check, I think, Patrick can help us check out to figure out if this is already a part of officer training somewhere. I'd like to know whether it's on a license or not. I don't know. My first concern was that I've never even known to look in the back of my license, right? And so, Mr. Chair, as an officer, like how often did you even have to look at the back of a license, right? Like these are things that I don't know, but I think this committee, speaking for us, we want to do something about this. So we would like more pathways to an answer to get something done.
Does that sound like something I said to you a couple of hours ago, Rachel?
It does. And Mr. Chair, if I may, I actually wrote down some ideas for possibilities. Okay. So I think that there are a couple. We could amend or strengthen the blue card legislation that already exists, and in that require the MVA to include clear, robust information on their websites. And instead of a card, require potentially like an envelope. A couple of states use envelopes in which you put your license directly into it. I understand there was some concern that the card might get separated from a license or an ID. So there are some states that actually put the envelope, you put the license or the ID directly in, so that it's all together, can be handed to the law enforcement officer all at once. It also immediately identifies the person as having a disability. And I think so whether you strengthen that or change this, I think that required training, education, and awareness is critical component to add. And then I think the third real suggestion would be to broaden it to not just autism. So, and how you do that, I have states that have done it different ways. I'm happy to share that. I don't know that I want to tell you how to do that. But I think, the biggest concern we need to address with that is that we want all people with disabilities to be afforded the same protections, whether or not they choose to disclose, right, or use that designation. And so perhaps that training piece and the broadening of the disability piece could help with that.
Okay. Yeah. And just so the committee knows, when Rachel and I talked earlier, I had said that I had concerns with just a blue card because I didn't want it to get lost in a glove compartment. Like if those two things, if the subcommittee's will is to go in that direction, I think having it like some kind of an insert makes a lot more sense, because I just see a blue card getting lost in the glove box or in a wallet, and then the officer that's doing the pulling over doesn't even, it gets missed, and then the person that has it gets flustered because, oh my God, what about the blue card? So I want to avoid all of that. So what I'd like to do a couple things. One was, Rachel, can you circle back, please, with the bill sponsor and go over some of this stuff with her? I just want to be respectful of her story.
I'm actually meeting with her tomorrow at noon. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, Delegate Parrott.
Thank you. This is just a question. I'm not sure if this is a solution or not. I know that someone who has diabetes, they can put it on their wrist or they can put it around their neck. I mean, could something like that be an option here? And then it would be much more visible for the police. They wouldn't even have to ask for the license. They would just know right away.
I guess that would be something, but then everywhere they go and every supermarket, everywhere they go, it'd be clearly, they might want to keep that kind of private and only disclose that kind of information when they're actually having interaction with law enforcement. At least that's my understanding of the original intent of the bill, but I'm open to other thoughts or suggestions. Does that answer your question, Delegate Parrott?
Delegate Perry, you talk about like when people have a severe penicillin allergy and they have to wear that like silver, red and silver kind of bracelet.
Yeah, then you know right away. Yeah.
Yeah, I would fear that would draw a lot of attention to folks that might want to remain on the down low unless they need to. Delegate Learman, I saw your hand up earlier. I don't know, because this is going to be the last question that we're going to be done for the night.
No, all good. It's fine. I appreciate Delegate Boyce's comments. Rachel, thanks for joining us. I think this is one of those bills where there's a will, there's a way. So.
Agreed. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Can I ask Rachel if you could memorialize your suggestions into an email to the chair and he will get it to the rest of the subcommittee?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Patrick. You're awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you to the committee. Hey, we went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bills out and got a substantial amount of done
6
on 12 other bills. 6 bills out. So yay. Thank you, everyone. We'll be in contact.
I just want to